All right, good morning, everybody. If you want to make your way in here for classes, make your way to your various classes, I should say that. My lid is leaking. Uh-huh. Okay, maybe a little both. The lid is definitely leaking. I don't know about that. There's one thing I'm good at, it's probably drinking coffee. Worked on that one for a lot of years. All right, guys. Well, if you want to make your way in here, we're going to start up the forum again today. Let's see. Last week, what did we talk about? Swimming. JD wasn't here. I'm sorry. We had to pick one. I guess we picked Kim as our favorite. I told everybody to give Kim a bad time because she likes drugs and she wants to talk about it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But last week we talked about swimming, and kind of the direction we went is we went with kind of historically, traditionally, there has been some talk at least about what did Miss Terry call it? Mixed bathing, not even mixed swimming, right? But mixed bathing. And what did that mean? Well, that was basically the idea of men and women swimming together. And what we talked about was it kind of just stems back to this idea of modesty, right? It kind of comes back to checking your own heart, but then we've historically put that on the other person who's trying to provoke somebody's heart to fall, to stumble. And the street goes both ways, just like on modesty, like on a lot of these topics. So that's kind of where we hung out and talked the most. But when it came to mixed bathing, swimming, it's one of those things that you see the point like way back there and it's kind of went a long ways the other direction, right? So I didn't tell you one way or another, as I try not to do on any of these topics. But we did invite anybody to go swimming in the afternoon that wanted to. So I don't know what that means. But this week we're tackling the topic here in the forum of drugs. So this one's kind of connected to when we talked about drinking alcohol. Drugs is kind of connected to that. I think there might be a couple different aspects that you guys might have to talk about today. But when it comes to drugs and being a Christian, what are some perspectives you've seen, experienced, or heard? Anybody else other than Kim? I'm trying to hold her off for just a second here. Very excited. All right, we'll go with Nancy first. I have one first. All right, go for it, Nancy. Okay.
Obviously, all
Mhm.
yes. And
Okay, that's
not
it.
just because, not because,
I think that's a good place to start. Yeah.
but
We'll talk about that.
they have the whole year round.
And does that really matter? Okay.
And
Absolutely.
does, oh, that's
Yeah. Well, we are welcome to talk about any of those topics, but I want to hang out on one because I wasn't sure if we would talk about this or not, and then we'll move on from there, right? On to Nancy's kind of first point. We don't typically think about this with drugs when it first comes because we think of like the effects of drugs, but look at what we should be doing as Christians, shouldn't we be following the laws of our land, right? Romans 13, verse 1, let every person be subject to their governing authority. Or Titus chapter 3, remind them to be submissive to their rulers and authorities, to be obedient and to be ready for good work. We kind of have this perspective from the New Testament, especially, of even if we agree or disagree with the laws of the land we live in, right? We are to be submissive in a way. We are to live at peace with all people, is what Paul would say, right? And so a way that we can do that is we obey the law. Now, some of us are like, well, yeah, obviously, heroin, then that's a good rule not to do. But we struggle with this on the small versus large scale at times, right? Harold struggles with this when it comes to speed he drives in a car, stuff like that, right? That's Harold's one. We all have to kind of wrestle with, really, it is our responsibility submissive to the law of the land. Now that really kind of is hard, especially in our American culture, because we don't agree with all the laws and the lawmakers and the people in power. It doesn't say agree with them. So I think that's a good little tidbit to throw in there first. If it's illegal, aren't we called as Christians to follow the law? I think we are. I didn't even think about that one, but that's a good starting point. All right. So whether they're legal or illegal, we've got a lot more to talk about. Kim.
Obvious.
Jen, did you have something that... Yeah. And that's a secondary or third-ary on our list because we put up smoking and nicotine and also caffeine, and I failed to write it down. Talk about it, right? But if you look at the property of, let's say, nicotine, caffeine, what are some other ones we kind of rate? Like even creatine and some stuff like that. They alter your state like a drug. So they're stimulants. They're uppers, as we call them, right? Where they're uppers, right? And so technically, caffeine is definitely a drug. Technically, nicotine is technically a drug, even though they're just those help me get through the day feel-good things, where they're more acceptable to us. And also, like Kim was getting in, and I don't have an answer for this. I'm going to have to wrestle with it a bit. We have a lot of federally allowed drugs, right? That? Oh, yeah. Well, are you saying, is that a drug? You have an answer. There you go. And so we'd have to get a little scientific here, but usually I think a drug is defined by altering something in your mind, right? But, well, not always negative. That's what Jen was saying too, but Right. At that point, we do have natural drugs within our system, right? So that is part, I think, of, especially in our culture, our full of knowledge culture. We don't know where to draw kind of the line, especially we can identify it sometimes. Then how do I identify what is good versus what is bad, what is enough versus what is? Did you have something, Nancy? And then Kim. Well, I don't know, but thanks for that. And I mean, and we're getting in, MSG is a salt. That's basically what it is, but it also has addictive properties, right? And that's what makes a lot of things very good. That's why you can eat like instead of one normal home baked pizza. There's like some reason where it's like, I don't really like this, but I need more. And that's kind of so like, again, where do we define the line of drug and what do we do about it? It's yeah. I don't know if she thinks they're healing, but there's definitely some people. It was all about oils. So we can't really hang out on synthetic or natural too much either, because kind of where we started talking about mind altering. God has grown a lot of them organically. I want to use that terminology. Um, we still have to be careful with which mushrooms we select to eat because they have some very potent. Well, I don't know. What's that? I just avoid. I avoid all mushrooms. I'll use that as my excuse, but I just rarely like mushrooms. If they're grilled, I'm down with it. But if you look at, there's natural growing things that are mind altering. Now, humans really like to meddle. So if we find something that God has made, we like to make it more of something. And a very strong case for that is our modern marijuana. Um, I did a whole like 530 marijuana in college, and like this proved the potency of marijuana because it is a naturally growing plant, right? And so, yeah, not me. I'm not a marijuana scientist, but so we do like to meddle and make things stronger, different, right? And we even see that happening in nature at times. But humans involved now is it interesting? Before Jen. Yeah.
Well, don't all of those red dye, yellow dye that
Yeah.
That's all.
I don't-
That's stuff. Was there.
So I'm gonna offend you a little bit now. So we could smoke the weed. So, yeah, it's just like yes.
Don't do that, but they don't do that, but you.
Well, we do have in Genesis that all plants are good for eating. Do that one. But we're talking, and I want to drive us a little bit of a different direction here. The human factor is probably consistent in drugs of any kind, right? Whether we have taken something natural and perfected it to have a better high, or we've created something new. We have tons of synthetic things. We use them most, like we kind of talked about there for a second, in our healthcare, in actually curing diseases, stuff like that. So where, like Kim was talking about, where is the balance? Well, the first thing to ask, I'll come back to you. The first thing to ask is kind of like, why? Why are you taking it? Right? Are you taking it for a high, or are you taking it for a cure? Get into that? All right, get into that some more. Go for it. Kind of like alcohol. Talked about that. Um, we've moved on in modern medicine farther than but alcohol medicine as well. Talked about that. And same as alcohol, there's kind of a point where you can have some alcohol and it's relaxing, kind of filling a need. Then there's like the very next step, which happens quickly sometimes, of I completely have escaped the world. I don't even know how to count to 12, right? And there's a progression there, right? And so when it comes to drug use, that's kind of for us because sometimes we don't necessarily realize we're kind of like drunkenness, kind of figure out where much is. When it comes to drug use, sometimes you don't ever figure that out and you're just there, right? Talking about drugs much. They are the most abused substance. Prescription drug abuse. And that's kind of part of talking about it. So, how do we find that balance between healthy, proved? I think somebody's going to fire me, but I do that with alcohol too, right? You could find a little piece, find a little balance, but then the very next step, drunkenness. So how do we determine that with drugs? Different for every drug. Have advice? I think that's true, right? But then we can even go, so discernment comes into play, and that's what Kim was talking about with the heart and discernment. Those are like the two words we keep hitting here. Drugs are a little bit harder because sometimes you have to have a team to help you discern, right? Sometimes quickly, instantly overcome an addiction. I share this story often, but when I was in Belgrade, senior pre, whatever you want to call him, he broke his arm at the youth rally ice skating, right? So they gave him like the oxycodone, right? The good stuff, you know, after you get that arm surgery. He was on it for a little while. His nurse one day looked at him and said, "You haven't taken your oxytocin, have you?" And no, I'm about to. Like, yeah, I can tell because you are tweaking, you're missing it out. Like, you know, you can tell that he's missing, he's addicted, jittery, like raw. At that very moment, she went and flushed the rest of the oxy because he was already addicted a week in, right? So powerful stuff he got from a doctor, but he was already addicted. So we need maybe some discernment from our family on that too, because we think we're just cruising along and we're in a great state of mind, but not being. I think there's good discernment, good balance. I don't have an answer for you on that. And like Nancy kind of was pointing out, can you completely escape substances in your life? I'm not even sure you could act physically. American culture, Americans, you probably get some sort of substance from your weed killer right outside. Kevin? Mm-hmm. Kind of the same story. I tell you, you don't realize why. Then you have the opposite side of that too, and some of us adults know that the withdrawal process from some of those illegal. So yeah. All right, Nancy. Well, you have to continue on the care aspect. And I understand, Nancy, cared. We're harping, right? But I think if we foremost about caring for someone, we come out of a lot of love, and we know it's going to be a long process. If you're talking about like real legit hard drugs, that's not. You're not going to get somebody to quit on Tuesday and be fine on Wednesday. That's not how it works, right? And I mean, even in our culture, we have drugs to combat the drugs, get you off the drugs, you're on a lesser drug to move on from there, right? So you really have to. It's a long game of continuing. And a lot of people who are addiction specialists applies to anything from sex and porn to drugs. Addiction specialists, there will be and with them through all of the. I don't have a great answer. Heaven. Kevin, what else have you learned at school other than vaping? That's true. Yeah, we're not talking. We have another class about nicotine smoking, so we'll talk about it. But school, especially, they kind of have shut down now. Basically, they packed a jewel full of enough nicotine. So they're starting at a baseline of a pack a day. Way hardcore. Knowledge on it. So let me throw a little tidbit in here. What is the experience when you've fully committed to getting high? I know it changes per drug. Okay. Yeah. Right. So I'm not trying to put you too much on the spot. Have you substituted that with something, or are you cold turkey on the drug of nicotine? Talking about how coffee and nicotine are like caffeine, not coffee. Caffeine and nicotine, they're also drugs. And that one would be, most people would say that's a small high. You're thinking, feeling? I guess that's what most people. But I mean, yeah, feel like, well, and said too much. What else what is experienced during a high, especially the hard stuff? Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is written on. You know? Do you have Nancy? I didn't hear you.
Euphoria.
Euphoria. And I'll go another step further, like completely different worlds that you're experiencing, right? Completely like non-existent things, euphoria, enjoyment, peace, and we kind of can go down, depending on dosage and drug, right? Calming, way over here, depending which drug you're on at the time, you're someplace in between, or how much you've taken, right? Marijuana is kind of a good be down here, but it can also be Um, Kevin. Yeah. Um, Tolerance, right? That's what Kevin's describing is that happens with a lot of drugs. Get started with a little bit, good, but next more. It does happen with food. Yeah, absolutely. McDonald's has. Do we have, if you were to look in the New Testament about drugs, it's hard to find something. Find more about alcohol or drugs are similar. Jordan talked about being sober-minded and sober in spirit. That applies to drugs as much, right? But there is a word that you guys might kind of an American and English word in that is in the New Testament a couple of times, and let me make sure I pronounce it right. It is pharmakia. Pharmakia is. Does that sound like any English word we have? Pharmacy, right? So we're like already connecting some dots here. That word is only used 3, maybe 4 times in. What's it translated as? Witchcraft or sorcery. It's never translated. Pharmakia, this word, sorcery and witchcraft, is the word for drug. But it is always in the 4. It's only 4 examples. It's not like a lot. So when I say always, it's only 3 or 4. It's translated witchcraft. So going to the mind-altering state, entering a new world, they understood that. Right? And so I don't know exactly all the history. I'm sure you really deep. Something I was opening my heart and mind to. But there was a deep connection. There was something between taking a substance, entering into the dark world, right? That's what witchcraft and sorcery is described as in the Bible, is entering the dark world. So when we talked about spiritual warfare, the demons and angels fighting around us, their perspective, how the witch sorcerer entered into that was. I'm even going to go another step further, and you guys call me a freak. Let's talk what Jen's got to say here. right? Yeah. Do in secret, something like that's the wording, right? First Corinthians 8, probably. I'm digging through it. Yeah, it's probably First Corinthians 8 if you guys want to look that up later. But, so, I think it's interesting. I'm going to go a little fruitcake version here of the witchcraft, the darkness. 6 bugs enter into the thinking and spirit of a person, okay? I know that sounds pretty fruitcakey, but what I'm saying is we already know that kind of this world, go into another one, lose discernment, lose sobriety, sobriety, and at the very least, that opportunity. I don't know, anywhere at the very least, something open the door for someone like that. But that's how I perceive when we look at witchcraft. Kim? Also, I'll say that I think walk through the, but I mean, different ones. Wait. Open the portal now. Have this. Right. So it's kind of the idea of you could say that with any. You could say that Ephesians verse with anything, right? Don't be consumed by what you eat. Rather be consumed by the Spirit. Don't be consumed by what you own, but rather be consumed by the Spirit. Not by another. That's kind of what we've been talking about in the fruit of the spirits. Is that's what what it should look like to be consumed by God. Kim? Mm-hmm. Not God. 100% not. And I like at the end of verse 14, James 1:14, each is lured and enticed by his desire, meaning that it's not all the same for everybody, right? Some people have never struggled with certain drugs, but they struggle with other ones more, right? Or vice versa. Ice cream or peanut, there you go. And so we are all enticed by the things that come in our. All right, guys, we're about out of time. Does anybody have any final comments when it comes to drugs? Courtney. You ruined most foods back there. We already got coffee and now we're cheese. All right. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Larry? Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I just didn't see you. Mm. Yeah. Again, Satan using something, right? And he, from the garden, he has the opportunity from that point forward. All right, let's see if my computer will connect here and we'll spin the wheel. If not, you guys just have to take my word for it. All right. I'm just going to spin it. You guys can look on my screen. All right. Okay, let me ask you this question. Actually, next week I will not be. You guys want to tackle a new topic with Larry? Or do you want to talk about this one? You want to look at some. What is the preference? Preferences. Wow. Okay. Go. Force. Force. Good luck. All right. All right, guys. Well, I will not be here next week. We'll probably get to talk about that for a couple of weeks, I'm imagining. So, let's see. All right, Larry, have fun with that one next week. Dennis is going to be giving the sermon, so he's going to be talking about the fruit of the Spirit. All right, guys, I'll see you in a few minutes. I've
I've got things to say about that.